All right, let's just dive right into this explainer. Today, we're taking a fresh look at the incredibly dramatic and frankly fascinating story of the book of Jonah. Now, we're talking about a narrative that is absolutely packed with outright rebellion, some deep dramatic irony, and ultimately this idea of boundless mercy. You know, it's a story most of us have heard pieces of, right? But when you actually lay out the facts and the sequence of events as they went down, the takeaways are just surprisingly profound.
Just listen to these desperate words for a second. Pick me up and throw me into the sea. I know that it is my fault that this great storm has come upon you. Pretty intense, right? To figure out how a hand-picked prophet of God ends up uttering these desperate, totally self-condemning words to a crew of terrified sailors in the middle of a raging ocean? Well, we gotta go back to the very beginning. We really need to pinpoint the exact moment things went completely off the rails.
So, let's get into section 1, the flight from God.
Now check out this immediate geographic contradiction between what was asked and what was actually done. The word of the Lord comes to Jonah, son of Amittai, with a super clear directive. Go to the great city of Nineveh and preach against it, because its wickedness has come up before me. Simple enough, right? But Jonah didn't just politely refuse. He did the literal opposite. He goes down to a port city called Joppa, pays the fare out of his own pocket, and boards a ship bound for Tarshish to flee from the presence of the Lord. I mean, he went as far in the exact opposite direction as humanly possible.
Which brings us to section 2, into the raging sea.
And the consequences of running from divine responsibility? Yeah, they catch up with him pretty fast out on the water. The Lord sends a storm upon the sea of such massive scale and violence that the ship itself is literally threatening to break apart. It plunges these tough, experienced sailors into absolute chaos. They are terrified. Every single one of them is crying out to his own God, and they're just chucking their precious cargo overboard to lighten the load. But, and here's the crazy irony, while all this sheer panic is happening up top, Jonah had gone down below deck, laid down, and fallen into a deep, fast sleep. The captain actually had to go down there and shake him awake, begging him to call on his God so they wouldn't all die.
So, the sailors decide to cast lots to figure out who brought this curse on them, and wouldn't you know it, the lot falls squarely on Jonah. He owns up to it, he tells them he's a Hebrew who worships the God who made the sea and the land, and confesses, yeah, I'm running away. But the crucial thing here is that these pagan sailors actually did everything they could to avoid killing the guy. Even after Jonah tells them, look, just throw me into the sea, they frantically rowed hard to bring the ship back to land. But they just couldn't do it. The sea was getting wilder by the second. So finally, after crying out to Jonah's God not to hold them accountable for innocent blood, they reluctantly tossed the prophet overboard. And instantly, the sea just stopped raging.
That leads right into section 3, the belly of the fish.
With the tempest gone and the sea perfectly calm, the sailors are just left in total awe, offering sacrifices to the Lord. But for Jonah, well, his journey takes a dark, incredibly claustrophobic, and deeply personal turn. The text tells us that the Lord provided a huge fish to swallow the drowning prophet, and Jonah was trapped right there, sitting in the pitch-black belly of that fish for exactly 3 days and 3 nights.
Trapped deep in what he calls the realm of the dead, Jonah finally breaks down and cries out to God. And his prayer describes this absolutely terrifying descent. He talks about being hurled into the depths, the current swirling all around him, the engulfing waters threatening his very soul. He literally describes sinking all the way down to the roots of the mountains, feeling the earth bar him in forever, with seaweed actually wrapped around his head. Talk about hitting rock bottom. It's a moment of total, undeniable physical and spiritual brokenness. But it's in this absolute lowest point, literally as his life was ebbing away, that Jonah remembers the Lord. He realizes this profound truth, that those who cling to worthless idols are just turning away from God's love for them. So he offers this really beautiful vow of thanksgiving, wrapping it up with the powerful declaration that salvation comes from the Lord.
And this marks the ultimate dramatic turning point of our narrative. Having heard Jonah's prayer from the absolute depths, the Lord commands the huge fish, and it abruptly expels him, just vomits him right back onto dry land. He's been brought up from the pit, his life saved from corruption, and he's finally ready to receive his mission a second time.
Moving on to section 4, the repentance of Nineveh.
This time around, obeying the word of the Lord, Jonah doesn't run. He actually journeys to his intended destination, the great city of Nineveh. Now, the sources describe Nineveh as a massive, exceeding great city. We're talking so vast that it took 3 whole days just to walk across it. So Jonah begins by walking a single day's journey into this towering metropolis. And he doesn't even deliver a long theological sermon. He just cries out a single stark warning. 40 more days and Nineveh will be overthrown. And this one stark warning, it builds into an overwhelming, totally unprecedented reaction. Think about it. Jonah is a foreigner, walking right into the capital of a violent, wicked empire, delivering a message of imminent doom to massive crowds. You would fully expect him to be mocked, run out of town, or much worse. But instead, the exact opposite happens.
The sheer totality of their repentance is just staggering. The Ninevites instantly believed God. Word makes its way to the king, and get this. He steps right off his throne, takes off his royal robes, covers himself in sackcloth, and sits in the ashes. He issues a crazy citywide decree. No food or water for anyone, not even the herds or flocks. Literally everyone, man and beast, is covered in sackcloth, commanded to call urgently on God and turn from their violent ways. From the highest noble to the poorest citizen, the entire city violently turns from their evil in the desperate hope that God might relent and show them compassion.
Which brings us to a fascinating turn in Section 5, the prophet's anger.
And God does exactly that. When he sees their works, that they actually turn from their evil way, he repents of the destruction he had threatened, and he spares the city. But guys, this brings us to the most shocking twist of the entire story. Just look at the immense dramatic irony here. On one hand, you have the wicked pagan king of Nineveh, beautifully humbling himself in ashes to beg for mercy. On the other hand, you have God's own chosen prophet, Jonah. When God shows mercy, the text says it displeased Jonah exceedingly. He falls into this bitter, resentful fury simply because his enemies were spared. He is so mad, he actually asks God to end his life, saying it is better for him to die than to live. Then, Jonah reveals something incredible. He openly admits he fled to Tarshish in the very beginning, specifically because he knew this would happen. He knew God's character. He says, "I knew that you are a gracious and compassionate God, slow to anger and abounding in love." Jonah didn't run because he was scared of the Ninevites. He ran because he absolutely did not want God to forgive them. In response to this wild outburst, God just gently asks him one piercing question. Is it right for you to be angry? Let's wrap things up with Section 6, a lesson in mercy.
So Jonah storms out of the city, sulks over on the east side, builds a little shelter, and just waits to see if God might still destroy the place. And here, God uses a highly practical object lesson to explain his divine compassion. He orchestrates this rapid sequence of events. On day 1, God prepares a leafy plant, a gourd, making it grow up over Jonah to give him some shade and ease his discomfort. Jonah is exceedingly glad about this plant. He loves it. But at dawn the very next day, God prepares a worm that chews the plant so it completely withers. And then, as the sun rises, God sends a vehement, scorching east wind. The sun is just blazing down on Jonah's unprotected head in the desolate desert until he grows faint. And once again, Jonah stubbornly doubles down on his fury. When God asks him, "Is it right for you to be angry about the plant?" Jonah literally replies, "It is, and I'm so angry I wish I were dead." I mean, he is seriously claiming he's angry enough to wish for his own death over the loss of a simple shade plant. This brings us right to God's profound final argument. God highlights the sheer absurdity of Jonah's intense pity and concern for a fleeting, temporary weed. Jonah didn't labor for it. He had absolutely no hand in creating it or making it grow. It literally sprang up overnight and died overnight. Yet his heart was completely tied to it just because it offered him a tiny bit of temporary comfort. Then God contrasts that simple overnight plant with the great city of Nineveh. We're talking about a sprawling metropolis containing more than 120,000 people, or 600,000 persons, who, as God puts it, cannot even discern between their right hand and their left. These are spiritually lost people, not to mention the vast amount of innocent animals in the city. God is comparing the value of human and animal life, thousands of souls that he actually created, to a single withered plant.
Which leaves us with this lingering, provocative thought. A question left hanging in the air by God as the story abruptly ends. And should I not have concern for the great city of Nineveh? It's such a brilliant, open-ended conclusion. One that invites not just Jonah, but every single one of us to really reflect deeply on our own prejudices and the truly boundless nature of grace and compassion. Thanks for joining us on this explainer. We'll see you next time.